With this vehicle here, Lexus is going against the trend because Audi is dropping the Q2 and the A1. Mercedes is dropping the A-Class and the B-Class. The premium manufacturers say goodbye to the small segment, whereas Lexus says, hey, we're going to offer a Lexus here for around $30,000, pounds or euros, at least in the base version. Does that work? How Lexus is the all-new LBX? We're going to find out with Thomas and Autogefühl in 4K, full screen, full length. Let's go here with the front, which is typical Lexus design, I would say. Maybe a little bit more drawn back, not as dramatic as the sedans or something, but you still have this shape right here and then this rather open grille. This is here ruby red, the very striking red color, and a nice daytime running light design with this chrome accentuation. It looks a little bit crossover SUV-ish, however I can already tell you so far that the seating position and the driving is more hatch-alike, but we're going to find out more about that. Wheels in 17, or these ones here are the optional 18-inch wheels. And the length here is indeed only at 4 meters 19 or 165 inches, so it's a tiny Lexus indeed. You can also get a contrasting roof here in black at this point. Does it, by the way, remind you of a Toyota model? We'll talk later about that. A very clean rear design with a light strip going all across. Top speed is 170 kilometers an hour, 105 miles per hour. Is that enough for the German Autobahn? Yeah, in most cases yet. And also it's a tiny vehicle, maybe not thought for like high-speed Autobahn and so on. Interesting technology-wise is that with that suspension on the rear axle, if you have the front-wheel drive model, then you only get a torsion beam in the rear. However, if you go for the all-wheel drive model, a little bit increased weight, then they went for a double wishbone in the rear, supposed to give you more comfort. At the same time, the chief engineer of Lexus told me that he would actually go for the front-wheel drive version only due to, some less weight and therefore more driving agility. One more feature we can show you. Leah will assist us. Yeah, she's doing the wiper. Here, look at that. In the very front there's a small nozzle. And that means the nozzle is integrated in the wipers itself, actually. There we go, she activates the wipers. Now you can see it's really smooth. It doesn't get sprayed on the windshield, but it's really coming out of the wipers itself. So that's, of course, a better wiping function. Yes, we know it's not a new thing, but for this segment, it is actually quite rare. Now I've put the car in the shadow for you, that we can better see the turning indicators or the hazard lights. They look quite cool in the front, don't they? By the way, here our shooting location today is in Valencia, so best greetings to all our Spanish friends. You maybe know that we also have a Spanish language channel with a direct translation voiceover, if you're interested in that. Here in the background, this nice water and so on, this is the Ciudad de las Ciencias. I hope that was the correct thing. So it's like the city of arts and science in Valencia. A very impressive thing here with museums, these water basins, and we got an exclusive allowance actually. So Lexus has organized that we can put the car right here. Usually it's not allowed to go with the cars here. So we also have a very nice shooting location for you. What? This is the rear turning indicator. I think here when they say, hey, we want to present you a small premium vehicle, should have been a little bit more effort here, right? Okay, and I also had my Jar Jar Binks moment. So what I also want to show you here, design-wise, look at that, how the design line goes in there, very central. So this requires a lot of effort when doing the tools for the vehicle to be able to produce this. This is the Lexus key fob, like with any other large vehicle, only that this is a tiny one. And then here you can see these door handles. They don't give you a haptic feedback. It's just when you press them behind, they come a little bit towards you. So it's kind of like this very smooth process. And then door closing sound. That's very solid, like that. We open the doors and then they use, it's not entirely hard, but it's not super soft on the top part. Here, this is a little bit softer. This is like a leatherette covering. However, I have to say on the side, they don't use the highest grade of leatherette. So I would prefer a little bit higher quality grade from the leatherette here. Then, this is also interesting. You just press it here to open the doors. It's like this electric mechanism also to make it smooth and easy. If it would fail at some point, then you pull it. This is then the manual opening. Then interior, different trims are available. This trim here is completely animal free. It's called Premium in the UK or Emotion in Germany. Or the Elegance trim will also be animal free, and then you can get, for example, also this new material on the steering wheel. And this is pretty cool because it looks better, it feels actually also better and softer. Also underneath the material you can touch it in, it's pretty cool. And Toyota and Lexus with this new material, they have actually said that it has less abrasion, so it is also more durable. And the seats, this is also leatherette here, also with perforation. It's available with or without perforation. Here then without the perforation on the top part, some contrast stitches on the inside. Yeah, that looks actually quite fancy and also is supposed to set it apart from its Toyota counterpart. And then seating position, what they did here is, it looks crossover-ish, but the seating position indeed is like, you know, small hatch seating position. So they want to give you more hatch driving feeling. Headroom with 189 or 6'2", still a lot of headroom left, no problem. You get along as a tall person. Just here to the middle console, it gets quite narrow, but then again, they also have this soft leatherette cover here that you don't damage your knee. The steering itself, up and down, in and out, with a smooth process to adjust. So how premium is it here? All hardpack. No covering on the inside. Yeah, that could be better. Then again, even the BMW 5 Series in the new generation has hardpack at the inside of the door pockets nowadays. Yeah, maybe not the best trends for premium interiors. But what else do we have here? Look at that middle console. In the front part we have inductive charging pad. Then there's also another place where you could theoretically put your smartphone, but maybe not ideal. Cup holders are adaptive here. Then you have this step system for the gear selection. Here a button for EV mode only, but usually you leave this hybrid system in the auto mode and the vehicle picks it itself. Here also everything with the same leatherette covering. You can slide this one backward and open this one. Yeah, maybe not the best solution, but it works. Here another cup holder, you can also pull it out and then you have more space for clutter underneath. Interior cockpit overview. What I really like is that we don't see too much high gloss and not so much hard packed plastic. This is soft touch. Then here, this is also soft touch with a contour stitch here as well. And also these inserts here. And also this is a matte atmosphere. So that's actually what I like. Screen 9.8 inch. So we can also only say 10 inch. Instruments start with the base version 7 inch smaller, but this is then full digital 12.3 inch. And in the instruments, you can also change around the view a little bit. The weird thing is just that you control it here, but what you do, you don't see really in the instruments, but in the head-up display. I do appreciate manual climate control here with a physical interface. Just the vent strength here, or the fan speed, and also where the air is coming from. This you have to do in the screen. This is the car internal GPS. It works, but could be a little bit quicker or more responsive. Most of the time then you will use Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. You can either use it with a cable. That's the one possibility. Apple CarPlay also works wireless. Android Auto so far only wired. That's at least what I heard. So I can test it here then with the Apple one. And when I pick music here, this is the optional 13 speaker Mark & Levinson sound system, manual volume control, and it's a really nice sound. So I like that sound system here, and good integration of the CarPlay as well. I really have to say my favorite thing on the interior is the quality of the steering wheel. It also has a nice ASMR effect. And after all, this is here the #1 interface, driver and vehicle. Now I move to the passenger seat to show you two very interesting things. First of all, I found out here more about the build quality of this vehicle, if it's really premium. Here, look at that, the glove box is closed at the moment, but I can still push it in, you see here. And also this button here for the opening mechanism is not what you would actually expect from a premium vehicle. Here then, underneath where you put your feet actually for the passenger, look at that, this part here. You just touch it with your feet and it's just loose. It's not well attached here actually. Before anyone says now, wait a minute, you're just doing this with Japanese cars. No, as I just said, also with the BMW 5 Series we criticized the interior build quality and so on. I do not care if it's Japanese or German. Just because I come from Germany does not mean that I rate German cars any better. We look at it individually, and what you always have to say is that Toyota and Lexus are very good in the reliability rankings. That has been throughout the past years, and you always have to mention that. But when they promise a premium interior and say this is not a Toyota, we always have to test it. In this case, I have to say, is it really a premium interior? Not quite, I would say. But what about the space here? When we go a little bit more in the front, this is the maximum I could sit as a tall passenger. How much space is there still left in the rear? Rear seats, this is how I would be driving actually. So the space I have behind the seat then of the driver's seat. Then the space behind the passenger seat, a little bit more forward. The question is, do I still fit in there to make it at least 3 adult proof? Rear doors, all hard pack on the top. Here, this is then the soft touch and also this easy opening mechanism. And then behind the passenger seat, I can sit with 189 or 602. The headroom is really close. It does exactly fit here. But then when I would slide, yeah, I mean, theoretically you can also, you're at least allowed to also sit in the middle part. Here you can see behind the driver's seat, yeah, that doesn't really work. At least ISOFIX on the rear, and of course, rear seating is not the focus of this vehicle. You cannot fold down anything here. You have 2 USB-C chargers here, however, in the middle. What about the trunk here? Is it also tiny, like the whole vehicle? 400 liters for the front-wheel drive version. If you have the all-wheel drive, then 315, so you lose a little bit. Here, the normal width, let's see. Yeah, it's 1 meter or 40 inches, that's good. The length, of course, somewhat limited at 75 centimeters or 29 inches. You see here it goes quite deep in there for the trolley and so on. You can fold the seats 2/3, 1/3 split as well, but you have to reach over or go around. So overall, I think it's quite okay considering the size of the vehicle. So, and then the question is, of course, oh, child safety test, why not? That's pretty sensitive, good. Why do Audi and Mercedes drop out of these small vehicles? BMW still offers the Mini, for example. They have the segment for that. Well, it's a problem to make it profitable. So due to the safety regulations, cyber security, for example, as well, then of course also the crash safety, then all the emission laws and so on. And at the same time, electric vehicles are only profitable in a very small scale when the battery prices go down. So at this moment, it doesn't make sense for a manufacturer to build small vehicles. You cannot earn proper money with it unless you share the platform. And this one here, the Lexus LBX, is sharing the platform with the Toyota Yaris Cross. The question is it just a rebadged Yaris Cross? Or is there even something more? We've seen it on the interior. They are definitely more upmarket in the interior. Then they say they have more insulation and so on, so that it's actually more silent. We're going to find out with the drive. And also this more or less same engine from the base gets a little bit more power. Under the hood we have a 1.5 liters 3-cylinder with 136 horsepower. Acceleration figure 9.2 seconds here for the front-wheel drive version. If you have the additional electric all-wheel drive, then 9.6 seconds because you have 75 kilograms more on weight. The overall weight is 1,280 kilograms, so it's a pretty light vehicle. But actually the chief engineer asked me what do Germans especially think about this vehicle as for the premium sense? And I told them, the interior is actually pretty cool, but as for the engines, a lot of the customers in Europe might think, it's maybe a little bit underpowered. So the acceleration is actually quite slow. So the question is if people in Europe, especially in Germany, will accept this one here as a premium engine. It is very efficient. We're also going to find out more about it in the driving part. But some might say, I just want more power in a premium car, although this one is, of course, a very small one. What's your take on that? Welcome to Thomas's Driving Lounge with the Lexus LBX. First, a very interesting thing, which this one here has in common with the Lexus LM. that huge luxury van thing we have recently shown you as well, it has the so-called brake posture control. So when we're here in city traffic, the car tries to stay upright. A thing that usually is done like here now, traffic light. You see here I'm hitting the brakes, and you see it doesn't do a big nosedive when braking, which is actually totally normal if a car would do that. And more elaborated luxury vehicles try to even it out with active suspension technology, with hydraulics that, for example, front is then pumped up in driving, or when you accelerate, it works against it in that way, like the all-new Porsche Panamera. We are also going to show that to you, or maybe S-Class Coupe or GLE. They have this suspension leaning technology, but here they do it in a simpler way because they also need to keep the prices low. So what they do here is, with so-called brake posture control, usually you have most of the braking power in the front, and here they have this adaptive braking system that they can distribute the braking powers front and rear like they want to. And so a little bit more braking power is sent to the rear in like mediocre braking, and so the car doesn't lean so much to the front. If there's more braking needed, then that's welcome to Valencia, Spanish driving. But I mean, I like it. What I do like is that they are more daring in roundabouts, So when you're driving a roundabout in Germany, for example, it takes ages because everyone is waiting until there's acres of space, and then you get in. And here in Spain, everyone is going in the roundabout. It somehow works. That's the main difference. So back to this posture control here, you really feel that the car is a little bit more calmer in its body movement position, and I think it's a very interesting idea to achieve that with a simpler system than with active suspension technology. So again, the main effect is that a little bit more braking power sent to the rear, but they can always adjust that depending on the situation you have. Here in city traffic, of course, the hybrid system plays a major role. Then it plays out all its efficiency advantages. So, for example, you can always use this regenerative braking when there's the next traffic light and so on. And often when you lift your foot off the throttle, then we have electric driving. Here, for example, I see at the moment RPM is at 0, and then I'm just in the EV mode, getting all the power from that buffer battery. And there you can actually score some very good efficiency figures, some 5 liters and 1 kilometers, so some 50 mpg US, 60 mpg UK. And you might wonder, wait a minute, shouldn't that be even lower because Toyota RAV4 or Toyota Prius and so on, or also Lexus ES or whatever, in the bigger vehicles you can score similar consumption figures with that hybrid system. And yes, that's actually true. And obviously the lower weight we have here doesn't have the biggest effect on that. So usually is in the way that it is always efficient no matter which size of the vehicle you have, and if it's a little bit smaller and a little bit lighter, it doesn't make the biggest effect that it's even more efficient or something. Here in city traffic, it's actually good to have now this smaller vehicle, and this is also their main argument, because for European roads, especially if you have the more narrow cities, it just feels more relaxed when you have a smaller car and to find a parking lot and so on. And especially when Mercedes and Audi are dropping out of these smaller segments, then of course Lexus could have it a little bit easier to achieve new customers. Also really nice steering, I have a good feeling for that. There we go with the ASMR effect of the steering. So here the commands are transported very well, and you see there's no dead zone area, even fine commands are being transported to the road. I like that. Suspension-wise, this is a good testy because this is here a very uneven road, and we do have the bigger wheels mounted here, 18-inch, and there you do feel the bumps. So it is not a sports car, but I would say it's a rather sporty setting for the suspension. Here this is also the front-wheel drive version only, so that means we have the more simple constructed rear axle. Yes, the chief engineer told me that driving dynamics-wise, the front-wheel drive only is better. At the same time, I would maybe think about going for the more elaborated rear axle with the overdrive version. So if you want a little bit more comfort, then you would stick with the 17-inch wheels. However, then the advantage of this rather sporty setup is it drives very well in a fun and dynamic sense. And even if you compare it to the Toyota Yaris Cross, which is the technological brother to this one here, or sister, how you like it, here, this one here definitely drives more agile and it is actually more fun. So I found it very cool. Even in the city traffic here, you have a lot of fun steering it around. It fits with the tiny size and so on. And the steering is nice. Suspension gives you a sporty feeling, and the whole seating position, that's also something where the engineers paid a lot of attention to. They wanted to make it small hatch-alike and not necessarily SUV or crossover-like, and that's also what I feel here. So although it looks on the outside SUV or crossover-like, it really drives like a small hatch. And yeah, I mean, why not? And the seating position itself is also comfortable, and what I also realize is here the steering wheel, I can always find a good position even with like when you're a tall driver. In some of the Toyota counterparts, sometimes the steering wheel for me does not go down far enough that I can find a good position here, you know, with my arms and with my hands. But here it's actually pretty good. So a lot of fun when steering it around all the way here in the city. That's also one of the main purposes of the vehicle, and also the efficient consumption stays in that region all the time. And here, once again, on the brakes, there's also this visualization, by the way, when I hit the brakes in the instruments. And then I also know that that the brake lights are flashing in the rear. Not sure if that's really necessary, but maybe it's also an interesting information. And now some acceleration, 40 to 80. Let's go. Plop, that's it. A little bit help here with going downhill. You see, it starts with some electric boost, then the engine sets in, and with this new hybrid generation they have, the effect that you have this is still there somewhat. But yeah, she always loves when I mimic engines. So it's still there somewhat, but way less than in previous hybrid generations with this e-CVT. So overall, I think that's okay. And you have to remember that in comparison to the Toyota Yaris Cross, this one here is in the comparable engine spec 1.5, so 1.5 seconds quicker. And since it's not the quickest overall, I think it's good that we have at least that, you know. So do it one more time. So from 60 to 100, let's go. Plop, that's it. Yeah, I went through here on the right side now that you could see the acceleration full. Yeah, it is somewhat enough, even though it's not very powerful. But when I then think about, if it would take 1.5 seconds more in the Yaris Cross, then there's definitely also a reason to go for this one. So yeah, and probably also in that case for the front-wheel drive only version, because the rear-wheel drive version is then a little bit slower due to the added weight. Here on the motorway now, they have this special soundproof installation also with the windows, for example, so it is more silent than with the Yaris Cross, so you gain that. Doesn't have the biggest effect in the city, but more here on the motorway. Toyota and Lexus are not the most silent on very high speeds though, because they don't primarily think of the German market where it would hit the motorway or the Autobahn and even quicker or faster. But here at normal motorway speeds, 1 km an hour, 60 miles an hour, it's also okay as for the noise and so on. Then we can set the cruise control. Here also then plus minus on the steering wheel, and once again I see that feedback of that in the head-up display. And let's see, move over, maybe we can also see something of the blind spot monitor. Let's see when it appears, there we are. So it appears then in the side mirror, I have this flashing thing, and then it, blinks also and gives me an acoustic warning when I would hit the turning indicator. Let's see about this active lane keeping assist. So I can set it here with a separate button. See how smooth it is. Here now the motorway makes a bend. You see some minor corrections. So it's not super smooth, but already quite okay. So you see here, that was well done. You're always obliged to keep your hands on the steering wheel still. So also upgrade assistance systems here. Everything you actually need about assistance systems. And what about to turn it off? Yes, some of these done easy with the press of a button. However, if you think about this new EU regulation as for the speed warning, when you exceed the speed, you have to go here in the menu and then go to the road sign assist and then deactivate that one. There's no direct hotkey for that, but at least you can do it more or less in a simple way. Now we can also drive 120 kilometers an hour. Let's see also how the noise installation works there. Yeah, I mean, it is getting somewhat windy. It's also comparable to the other vehicles in the corporation. But yeah, as I said, not set out for the highest of speeds, but the overall characteristic of the vehicle, seating comfort, position, and how it behaves on the road is still overall good as for the comfort level. When you think about larger Lexus vehicles, yes, of course, when you are thinking about it like an ES, so it's a taxi Lexus behind us also now at the moment. They're more and more used for taxi purposes, by the way, because also of the reliability and the hybrid system and so on, and because Mercedes is withdrawing or has withdrawn from the taxi market, especially in Germany with the E-Class. So then taxi drivers are also seeing the advantages of that. But if you compare now the very, very small Lexus to the bigger ones, here in the front cockpit it's more or less the same. The only thing, I would have more space for my legs, for example, here between the steering wheel and the middle console. It's getting kind of narrow for tall people, you know. That is definitely better when I would drive a Lexus NX or an ES and so on. But other than that, from the functionality and the seating comfort and the features and what we touch and see there, it is really Lexus-ish. So initially I said it starts right over 30,000. But then again, yeah, when you have some higher trims and some extra equipment, you can also get to 45,000 euros high trim plus all-wheel drive and so on. Then it's of course not cheap in that sense. But if you, for example, compare it to an electric vehicle at that size, then it's also more or less the same or a little bit less expensive. That's also what Toyota and Lexus think in their strategy at this moment, that electric vehicles are a little bit too expensive. They focus on this hybrid thing. They're coming with new EVs now, but they're definitely late to the game. But do you think it's the right approach? How Lexus is it? I would say exterior, definitely, yes. Interior in the front cockpit, I would say 60-70% or something like that. There are some details that are not on the same level as we would take a smaller vehicle from the Germans, for example. And sometimes you also have more luxury, of course, still if you would have a larger Lexus. But I think it can make sense, this concept, especially because the Germans have dropped out of these very small segments. If you compare a Toyota Yaris Cross here to this one now, yes, you have some more nice features and some more, more elaborated surfaces with this one here. But is the difference that large? Well, the acceleration, that one doesn't make a significant difference. And of course, the prestige and the exterior design and so on. But I would still think you could also go for a high trim level Yaris Cross, or you can now check out some more Lexus reviews.